Today our presentation will be on the final two poems on the poem papers.
The first poem assigned to us is Wystan Hugh Auden, who was born on the 21st of February 1907 and died 66 years later on the 29th of September 1973. His poem is widely influenced by political, moral, social, and psychological issues.
Our poem of choice for Auden was Funeral Blues. We chose this because we like the metaphors used throughout the text. This poem depicts the death of someone close to the author. We know this because the title is Funeral Blues, and in the fourth line of stanza 1, it states, "Bring out the coffin, let the mourners come." This tells the reader that a death has occurred, and later on, it states that he was my north, my south, my east, and my west. And I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. This showed that the narrator loved this person very much, and it was very valuable. In the last stanza, talks about the sadness of dealing with loss. It says, "Take everything away," and "for nothing now can ever come to any good." This is talking about how things have changed, and not in a positive way.
Our second assigned poet is Robert Minhinnick, who was born on the 12th of August 1952 and is currently 68 years old. His poetry is heavily influenced by political issues, the powerlessness of the silenced, and environmentalism as well, with many of his works also winning many awards like the Forward Poetry Prize, the 1993 Arts Council of Wales Book of the Year Award, the 2006 Wales Book of the Year Award, and the 2012 Wales Book of the Year Award.
The poem we chose by Minhinnick was The Cormorant, as the references to war is relevant to our assigned poems. In this poem, Minhinnick may be describing the bird as a representation of war and death, which is emphasized by lines like, "Not even the cruise missile on its flyby of El Rashid Street flies so flat, homing and under," which compares the bird to a weapon of war. The line, "You bring the dusk with you," and "Your midnight glove puppet," also reference the warlike nature of the cormorant. The most obvious reference to weapons of war is the first two lines of the last stanza. Here, the bird's flight is compared to that of a stealth bomber and the death it leaves behind. However, the line, "What are you anyway but a Death Star flicked by a warrior saint," may be Minhinnick saying that the cormorant is as vulnerable as he is.
The first poem assigned to us was Refugee Blues. This poem is a depiction of German Jews trying to escape Nazi Germany. This can be seen in lines such as, "Say this city has 10 million souls," which depicts the Holocaust. "Once we had a country and thought it was fair," which references Nazi Germany. "If you've got no passport, you're officially dead," referencing the attempts by oppressed people to escape via plane, and the most blatant of all lines, 10,000 souls marched to and fro, looking for you and me, my dear, looking for you and me, referencing soldiers looking for oppressed groups.
Stanza 1 and 2 set the scene for the rest of the poem. The line, "This city has 10 million souls," tells the reader that the poem will be about the Holocaust, as the Holocaust caused death of around 11 million people from groups like homosexual people, minorities, and most prominently, Jewish people. The line, "Once we had a country and we thought it fair," also tells the reader that the poem is set in Germany, as it is the country where the oppression was first introduced. The narrator saying that they cannot go there now makes the implication that the narrator and his or her companion are either out of the country or planning on leaving. However, based on later stanzas, it is clear that they are still in Germany.
Stanza 3 could be argued as irrelevant or non-essential, as it doesn't add much to the poem story-wise. However, there is much symbolism with the yew tree depicted, as the yew tree is a sign of hope. The line, "Every spring it blooms anew," also tells the reader that the tree is evergreen, and since the yew tree represents hope, the regular blossoming may represent hope returning regularly. Yew trees also have a long lifespan of approximately 1,000 years, which may reflect the ideology of surviving no matter what, which the narrator must have. The final line sets up for the next two stanzas.
Stanza 4, 5, and 6 are predominantly about trying to leave Nazi Germany. However, being rejected due to the old passports introduced in the last stanza. The line, "If you've got no passports, you're officially dead," may be implying that if you're stuck in Germany as a Jew, then you're as good as dead. Stanza 5 also shows the magnitude of the situation, as the narrator must wait for a year for a new passport. This implies that there are already so many people who have applied. Next stanza is used to give another point of view, which is that of those who do not want refugees in their country. This emphasizes how the oppression feels as if it is around every corner, and that it cannot be escaped.
Stanza 7 confirms that the poem takes place before or during World War II, as it references Adolf Hitler and the line, "Thought I heard thunder rumbling in the sky." This also references the oppression brought along by him. The thunder could also be a symbol for military aircraft, as from a civilian standpoint the sounds from aircraft could be mistaken as thunder. The final line also depicts Adolf Hitler and the oppressed groups as reflections of each other. Think prey and predator. It shows that both were thinking of each other and what each other were going to do next.
Stanzas 8, 9, and 10 all compare animals to humans. This could have been done by Auden, to say that the warfare brought by humans make us no better than the animalistic nature of wildlife. The first animal comparison is with poodles and cats. In stanza 8, the poodles are used to represent Nazi soldiers. This may be because an alternate meaning for poodle is a person overwilling to obey another, which could be referencing the soldiers' militaristic-like devotion to the tyranny of Adolf Hitler. Calling the soldiers poodles implies that they do not have any thoughts of their own. The line, "saw a door opened and a cat let in," also used symbolism, with the cat being symbolic of safety and the door being a symbol of freedom and safety as well. When coupled with the next line of, "But they weren't German Jews, my dear, they weren't German Jews," the line depicts the opportunity of safety being unavailable to them.
In stanza 9, freedom and safety is then represented by fish, as they are extremely free animals. The fish may also be representative of groups who aren't drastically affected by the Holocaust, as they are free and happy while living so close to oppressed groups, as the fish are only 10 feet away. Stanza 10 wraps up the trilogy of stanzas with the line, "They weren't the human race, my dear, they weren't the human race." This implies that the freedom of animals makes them more superior than humans, as they cannot be corrupted and manipulated into a war.
Stanza 11 mentions a building with 1,000 windows and 1,000 doors, and that none of them were the narrators. From a literal point of view, the line could be implying that they will never find a home. However, the building could be a symbol of community and a symbol of being safe in numbers. This means that the narrator doesn't believe that they will find their safety and freedom.
Stanza 12 is the most blatantly obvious of the poem. It references the heavy snow in Germany with the line, "stood on a great plain in the falling snow," and the soldiers who were tasked with looking for the narrator and his or her group with the line, 10,000 soldiers marched to and fro, looking for you and me, my dear, looking for you and me.
Our second poem was The Yellow Palm by Robert Minhinnick. This poem is about the war in Baghdad, as shown by the lines such as, "in the mother of all wars," referencing the war against Saddam Hussein in the 1990s, and a slow and silver caravan referencing tank warfare. The poem also emphasizes how war seems to be part of everyday life for civilians, as it references that children are comfortable with military machinery.
Stanza 1 begins with the repeating line, "As I made my way down Palestine Street." This repeats throughout the entire poem and recurs to show how long the war is lasting. This poem is based off the Gulf War, so the continuous presence of war makes sense as the events in this poem would be set just after the Iran-Iraq War. The stanza also mentions a coffin made of glass. The specificity of the material, that is glass, may be representative of how exposed the public is to the horrifying consequences brought by the war.
Stanza 2 and 3 depicts both the psychological and physical consequences of war. Stanza 2 shows the psychological, as it mentions how the blood on the wall traumatizes the muezzin. The muezzin is called upon when a prayer is needed, So to depict someone who was expected to be wise and to remain calm, to just be traumatized and desperate, it emphasizes a feeling that hope has been lost. Stanza 3 shows the physical consequences of the war, as it depicts two blind beggars who are revealed to be former members of the Imperial Guard. The stanzas also show how soldiers are easily disposed of after injury has occurred, and that they are nothing but tools in a war run by politicians.
In stanza 4, the lines, "The river smell that lifts the air," and "But down on my head fell the barbarian sun that knows no armistice," demonstrates how the sea used to be nice, and that it declined into a state of warfare. The use of the word barbarian has the connotation that the people are more brutal or savage.
The next two stanzas signify the desensitization of war to the population by showing the reaction of a child. In stanza 5, a slow and silver caravan is introduced. This can be inferred to be a tank, as to a child, it may be seen as a caravan. Calling the tank a caravan may also have been done to show how common tanks are. As to the public, they are now as interesting as caravans. The child's positive reaction to the tank also shows how military machinery is normalized in everyday civilian life.
In stanza 6, the color yellow is brought up a lot. This is because yellow is both a symbol of rebirth and happiness, but also a symbol of disease and impurity. A notable use of the color yellow is the mentioning of the yellow dates. This is because when Bahi dates are yellow, it is the first sign that they are edible. Hence, the yellow dates could represent a rebirth into a new environment. The fruit then falls from the tree into a child's arm. From this event, it can be inferred that the war is ending soon, and that the next generation, represented by the child, will experience the first stages of peace.
Both poems are quite similar as they depict wartime on a micro scale. This makes the poems seem more personal as readers get invested in characters. This also tends to create more of an emotional impact as a micro-scale poem makes it more relatable than if Auden and Minhinnick were to write about big battles.
Both poems also depict the new generation to be important. In Refugee Blues, the narrator is telling everything to what seems to be a child. Hence, the whole poem is a message to the new generation to tell them about the hardships that oppressed groups must go through. The yellow poem also places heavy emphasis on children, as the last stanza implies that they will be the first to experience peace.
The recurring repeating phrases also creates a sense of never-ending wartime for the characters. The yellow poem also has a more hopeful ending, as there is a chance for peace. However, it does not rhyme, whereas Refugee Blues does.
Finally, the poem feels more personal because phrases like "I saw" are used a lot.